Good morning, our dear viewers and listeners. Welcome to the Other Perspective, a weekly edition of ACFIM, which will be discussing aspects of money in politics and also other aspects regarding politics in Uganda and Africa in general. Today, we are going to be discussing about the dialogue and Uganda's multi-party dispensation. Last week, Ugandans were awake to the news that the leading opposition political party, the new National Unity Platform, uh, decided to decline joining one of the umbrellas that brings political parties represented in parliament together to always have build concern and dialogue on matters concerning Uganda's governance. Some of the reasons NUP gave for not declining to join iPod were because they looked at it as a platform that was used to just manipulate the political parties, and there was no concrete uh, actions that would come out of the discussions political parties represented there would make, and the recommendations were sometimes ignored and not implemented. So I know very many people outside there would like to know what is iPod. iPod is a platform that was set up in 2010 to bring together political parties across all their political shades in Uganda to foster a vibrant multi-party democracy based on peaceful coexistence of all citizens to work harmoniously for the betterment of the governance of Uganda. This platform has been bringing together political parties uh, for the last 10 years, and we have seen some of the discussions that have been made and recommendations that have come out through iPod. Some of them, of course, have been implemented. Some are still pending. So those are some of the things that are making some opposition political parties to doubt whether this platform is really there to benefit them and make sure that they are able to address some of the issues that is really affecting multi-party democracy in Uganda. So today I'm going to be joined by a panel of 5 experts who are going to give us their experiences and expertise on these issues of dialogue and multi-party dispensation in Uganda. The first guest is going to be Mr. Henry Muguzi, who is an electoral democracy expert. He has worked in this area for almost 15 years, and is grounded on the subject matter, and I know he will give us his views and opinions. We shall also be joined by Mr. Felix Kafuma. Mr. Felix Kafuma is a political finance expert who has worked in this area for the last 10 years and is going to give us his views and expertise regarding what he thinks, whether Uganda should go for dialogue, whether other political parties should also appreciate that dialogue coexists with political competition. And then we shall also be joined by Mr. Eddie Kainda. Eddie Kainda is an economist and is one of the brains who can analyze for you Uganda's politics and how politics and economics are intertwined. So he's going to be so wonderful in these engagements today. He's going to give us, because on various occasions, many people have said that's one of the reasons why political parties are not avoiding to join IPOD is maybe because of money. So we shall also need to hear some of these perspectives on that, whether money is the one driving political parties to join some spaces or not. Then we shall have Gerald Koraneza. Gerald Koraneza is a youth in political spaces activist. Is going to give us his own perspectives on how this decline by NUP of joining iPod has an impact on especially the young people who want to see the country moving in the right trajectory. So he's going to give us his lenses from that as perspective. And then lastly, we shall have Liza Karunji, who is a women in democracy activist. She's going to give us that perspective of how this decision by NUP is likely to affect effective and meaningful participation of women in politics of Uganda in terms of engaging with other stakeholders so that they ensure that women are able to participate meaningfully, and they are also at the forefront of ensuring that this country is moving forward at the right direction and right trajectory. So, as we know, last week, NUP made that decision basing on some of the incidents that happened during the just concluded 2021 elections in Uganda, after them going through what they claim a very most violent election. They were not given space to compete meaningfully. So they find it very difficult to to go and dialogue with a party in power that, first of all, denied them space to compete meaningfully. So now is the time they want to call them on board to dialogue. So I want, first of all, to start by asking Henry Muguzi, who is an expert in the field of electoral democracy. We do know that political competition and dialogue must coexist in any country. And for this to happen, we must have first of political parties in place. I want to hear from you, what is your take on the state of Uganda's multi-party dispensation?
Thank you very much, Abel. And of course, always a pleasure for me to be in this space to dialogue on issues that we think have a chance of building tomorrow, creating and shaping tomorrow's Africa, especially an Africa where we worry when we see military coups erupting, coming back, as we saw in Guinea and before then in Zimbabwe. We can't help but remember those days when the Western powers so often joked that political coups, military coups had become so common in Africa that they were more common than even breakfast. So we don't want to get back there. So we want to enhance hope in citizens, hope in democracy as a viable system of governance. But for that to happen, the key actors in the national politics, we need to understand one or two things. Number one, I think democracy, as we have learned, is not a one-size-fits-all. We therefore must find a democracy that befits the context of Africa. But that said, we need to understand that democracy is a space where people go to serve, which is why electoral leadership is a call to service. And therefore, and because it is a call to service, whether you win or you lose, that shouldn't matter. And because that shouldn't matter, when you get to be elected as a political party in opposition, for this case, in the case of the NOP, that seems to be the party leading the opposition, it is also okay to compete politically, but also on the other side have dialogue, because the bigger picture is about national interests. And you see, the party in power today will be in opposition tomorrow, and this can happen just as night follows day. It's only a matter of time. But the thing is that are you able to demonstrate as a new party that you understand these principles of democracy, that you are able to exercise and demonstrate political maturity to a level where you are able to tell when you need to compete politically and when you need to dialogue politically for the purposes of putting together the nation. We, as independent observers, but also commentators, when we saw the effect of this party, a party that was so was able in such a short time to mobilize and break barriers such as getting the youth interested in joining politics, barriers such as make sure that they field a humongous number of candidates, but also barriers such as making sure that the barriers such as those of money that we are looking out politics were broken, and they were able to compete and emerge, rise from the doldrums to become the leading opposition party. Now they have taken over power as the leading opposition party in parliament. I think this, when you achieve such heights, you are bound to exercise a certain degree of maturity, and the maturity in democracy comes in understanding that indeed political competition can exist side by side with the political dialogue. Back to you, Abel.
Thank you so much, Henry, for those interesting insights. Now, I want to go to Felix Kafuma. We do know that political competition is about fronting ideas, and one way of fronting the ideas is through dialogue. You come together with your ideas, share your ideas with your colleagues, whether they buy into your ideas or they disagree with them. You have to build consensus and agree on at least a point. So do you think iPod, as it exists currently, does it offer political parties a platform whereby they can be able to genuinely share their ideas and all of them agree and come up with a consensus in terms of fulfilling the national interest of Uganda?
I think I lost you a bit there, Abel, the last part, but I think to pick your question, it's more about interrogating whether iPod is really providing that space of dialogue, the much needed space of dialogue. And I must say that for starters, iPod came to Uganda upon invitation, meaning that by the time government felt it important to have a space that promotes dialogue between the different political party players, they had appreciated that you cannot practice democracy, which is you cannot practice democracy minus options of dialogue, minus the space of dialogue. You know, when you talk about multi-party dispensation, the pluralism of ideas, it then does necessitate or dictates that there must be a space through which different political parties, who in most cases may have ideas, opposing ideologies, opposing positions on the matter, that they come together and dialogue on issues to create a convergence. And the vision of iPod was to promote multi-party pluralism, going by the fact that in a multi-party dispensation, you need to dialogue. So as the understanding of iPod providing that space. Now, it's another debate altogether to start to audit the effectiveness of iPod as a space. But I think the principle, I think for us, before we discuss or make arguments for or against dialogue in the way it is being practiced in Uganda, I think the principle first is that to appreciate that, yes, it is very important in promotion of democracy, especially in pluralism of multi-party dispensation, to provide a space within which the different political party actors come together and dialogue on the most sticky issues to chart a way forward. Even when there are political parties with different ideologies, where they may have different ideas, which is very healthy in political party dispensation and democratic practice, it is also important that within their differences, they must find a space within which they agree on these conflicting issues for the case of the country, because it is Uganda first before political parties. So when it is Uganda first, then you have to put Uganda as a state above the political differences, meaning it is important that when these issues that might divide you on either ideology or that might divide you on beliefs are given a space through which a point of convergence for the good of the country can be arrived at. So in principle, dialogue within a multi-party dispensation is a very good and very healthy, and it's one of the tenets of democracy. So I think iPod as a space is doing that role. But I think the debate now against which now no poison to say should we be part of the space or not, it's more about the tenets and the practice or the effectiveness, depending on where you are, of that space, whether that space is really providing genuine dialogue, whether the actors in there are really objectively dialoguing on these sticky matters. But it is a very good space.
Thank you so much, Felix, for your insights. Eddie, you've heard Felix discussing about how democracy cannot be practiced minus dialogue. Now I want to bring you on from that point of view. You understand that there are principles of democracy and multipartyism. So I want to understand from you to what extent are these principles of democracy and multipartyism reflected in the political practice and in the way political actors in Uganda conduct themselves currently. Eddie, are you on?
Yes, Abel. I lost you somehow. I seem to have a network problem. What were you saying?
Okay, you've just listened in as Felix was trying to tell us how democracy cannot be practiced minus dialogue. And Uganda has various political parties. So far, we have about 20 registered political parties, but those parties that subscribe to IPOD currently are only those represented in parliament. And so I wanted to understand from you to what extent are the principles of democracy and multipartyism reflected in the political practice and in the way political actors that are represented in parliament conduct themselves.
Thank you, Abel. First of all, when we talk of multipartyism, you recall the history of multipartyism in Uganda, and we are saying we are looking at multi-party politics. It's in its nascent stages in the Ugandan context, and for political parties to grow, the issue of dialogue has to be emphasized. But in the context of Uganda, previously political parties in the opposition have used defiance as a means of putting government to tasked to account for the either actions or money or resources. But for me, it hasn't worked. And for political participation to thrive or democracy to thrive, there must be accountability, there must be listening to each other, there must be consensus in the way the key actors participate in electoral processes and democracy processes. But first of all, lack of the will by the political parties, for example, NUP and FDC in the Ugandan context shows ideological disorientation, if I might use that word. The parties lack ideological depth of what they want to do, and they are using defiance as a means of bring Ugandans on board. But we know that politics must transcend that. That at some point, when you are elected into position, you must perform. And if you have to perform with the voters that voted you into that position, we'll need you to account for for your time, for your resources, and many other things. If we are paying you as a new member of parliament or an FDC member of parliament and you're not performing, the fact that we voted you in does not mean that you're going to take us for a ride. I'm not happy with the way the opposition is taking the word opposition in its English meaning, that we must oppose each and everything the government brings on board. This is the time where we must put politics at the back seat and then perform for the people of Uganda. If we voted you and probably your MP candidate won, but the president did not win, we must not focus on having. We must not be preoccupied with removing the presidency, but also forget that we must perform as members of parliament. Later on, when these young people put their elected leaders to account, they'll ask you, yes, we voted you in, and you have been opposing government in terms of the should perform, but now we need the service. I can assure you, come 2026, if we go by the current levels of performance and non-adherence to the principles of dialogue in the democratic dispensation, many of these NUP MPs are going to be out of parliament because their subscribers or their voters now need service. We need jobs, we need business, we need money, we need to grow. So for me, I do not see politicians and political parties in the opposition adhering to democratic principles, especially accountability, dialogue, coming on the table together to have consensus on what exactly they should be doing. And in my perspective, that they're doing bad.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I want now to bring in Elizabeth Karunji. And from that point, you have discussed about why political parties, Eddie, you just told us why political parties should leave politics at the backseat and concentrate more on how to push for the national interest, regardless of the political sides they belong to. So I want to bring in Karunji, and I want to know from you, do you think political competition and dialogue can coexist in Uganda's current political context, where some political parties are still, they feel that they were cheated and they never gave them good space during elections?
Yes, Abel, thank you for that question. So ideally, in a properly functioning democracy, these two concepts should coexist. But looking at our context as Uganda, I don't think this has happened. This can happen, rather. If we just look at the previous election, it's very evident that we have an unhealthy political competition. We saw parties from the opposition continuously harassed by state security. They were not able to freely campaign, whereas the NRM on the other side had freedom. They could freely campaign. So when this happens, how do you expect these aggrieved political parties from the opposition to come and dialogue? They are not happy with the situation, and this is probably why NUP has been hesitant and has boycotted the iPod, because even though they come and dialogue, they know that the reforms will not be apprehended. So I don't think these two concepts can dialogue in the context of Uganda, whereas it should be. I don't think it is possible in our context. Yeah, that's what I think.
What if political parties who are aggrieved still use such platforms to bring on board and hold accountable some of the regimes of the political party that was in power by that time, and use those security apparatus to make sure that they don't participate meaningfully and only favor that party that is in power? Don't you think those spaces would have been beneficial for them to raise their issues?
Yes, one would argue it that way. Someone would look at it in that way, that this is the opportunity for you to come and give your issues that you have. But we have been having dialogue since 2010, and these same issues have been raised. But you've seen how the head of state himself mentioned that he's going to crush opposition political parties. How do you deal with that? What do you do in that instance when there is no will? Despite the reforms that are brought about, they're still not put into place. So what is dialogue yielding to at the end of the day?
Okay, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Now, I want to go to Gerald Koraneza. You've just listened from other panelists, and they are all having their different views and opinions concerning dialogue and multi-party dispensation in Uganda. I want to know from you, what is making some political parties, especially those in opposition, not to appreciate dialogue as one of the ways of building consensus in Uganda for building our nation to another level?
Thank you so much, Abel, for that very good palatable question that you've asked me. Dialogue is part and parcel in a multi-party democracy where you find a competitive elections, like for instance, even in our African politics, where politicians, they usually throw mud at themselves, of course, in the favor of hoodwinking or getting the support from the voters. So dialogue, the iPod in this very particular case, it's a very good space, a very good avenue for parties to come together after the election so that they can see how they can resolve the differences and the disputes that they had. I will applaud the Ugandan system, the way how we embraced multi-party democracy. Ever since we introduced multi-party democracy, there was a referendum which was made in 2005, and the country embraced that we should have a multi-party democracy, and in 2010, they thought it wise that the parties, they can come together and, you know, sign a memorandum of understanding of, you know, the parties which are represented in the parliament, to see how they can resolve their disputes, their issues, as we after, you know, maneuvering, moving throughout the country, you know, soliciting for support during elections. Uganda, we've done so great. We see even in 2010, we came up with the National Consultative Forum, where all of the political parties which are registered by Electoral Commission come together to see how they can bring, you know, their views, how they can bring their displeasures, maybe when it comes, you know, participation, organizing, you know, articulating their manifestos countrywide. So it's a very good move that the country, as Uganda, we took. But the only challenge, back to your question, which you asked, why is it that most of opposition parties, they are not embracing this? We have an issue where this IPOD, like recommendations, we don't have an accountability mechanism. You imagine, like the regime, the ruling government, it at times uses its state, you know, state machinery to coerce different political players, and now these very players, they usually come in this very iPod, and then they sit and agree on some recommendations and resolutions. But the implementation has been the problem. So what we need is to see at least an accountability mechanism that we should put in place, like in this very country, to ensure that the recommendations which these very parties usually come up with, you know, they are implemented. And we can also look at maybe like the sanctions. If, like, for instance, if the government cannot implement like the resolutions or recommendations made, then there should be sanctions. So that is when all political parties will embrace the idea of IPOD, the inter-party forum, where their issues, we expect them to be resolved. So otherwise, right now, we don't have a clear mechanism of holding IPOD accountable, like these very leaders. How can we hold them accountable for these very recommendations? Otherwise, before we get that very mechanism, we shall not yield fruitful results in dialoguing. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerald, for your views, and the other panelists. Currently, we are going to go for a small break, short break, then we shall return with the next segment.
COVID-19 lockdown has left us poor. Money from candidates won't make you rich. Do not be desperate. Focus on issues, not money. Often money used in campaigns is dirty money. Do you know its source? Corruption, mafia, drug trafficking, human trafficking, theft from national budget, self-seeking foreigners, selfish businessmen, selfish money lenders. Don't abandon your duty. Elect quality leadership, not big spenders.
Welcome back from that short break. Today, you're joined by a panel of 5 experts who are very passionate and about issues of democracy. We are discussing about dialogue and Uganda's multi-party dispensation. Before we went for a break, Gerald was hinting on aspects of accountability, lack of accountability mechanism on how some of the recommendations that are agreed upon from IPOD are being followed up or implemented. So I want to bring on Henry from that point? You know, I know you've done a lot of work around accountability for so many years, and you know how accountability is so crucial for any democracy to progress. Do you think the current regime has the political will of putting in place some of the recommendations that they agree upon from IPOD, or it's just all about going to have a discussion with other political parties and just make them feel that they are also part, they can dialogue with them, but yet in actual sense, the regime maybe doesn't have the political will to implement some of these agreed upon recommendations?
Thank you very much, Abel, because accountability is one of the foundational tenets of democracy. And without it, you're going to have a problem dispensing those democratic virtues. Now, when it comes to IPOD, the issue of accountability has always been a bone of contention. And the reason it's a bone of contention is that for the case of Uganda, and the truth must be told, we have a situation where you have one man that came to power through the barrel of the gun, one man that seems to have succeeded in strengthening his stronghold on public institutions. He has appointed almost every body from cabinet to public institutions. The situation I'm trying to put across is a situation that is akin to captivity. Now, a person like this, whose obsession in survival as the political leader is up there, may not necessarily yield to the demands of the people in opposition. Remember, when you are in opposition, you come to IPOD, your ultimate aim is to take over power, to wrestle power from this person. And this person, as he's looking at you and dialoguing with you, at the back of his mind, the one thing that is reigning supreme is what is the trick they are trying to put him into in order for them to wrestle power from me. And therefore, he's going to be very measured at what he gives away. But also the parties in opposition are going to have the same. So accountability then has emerged as one of the bonds of contention, because the citizens are saying, look, beyond the photographic situation, because every time there is an IPOD summit, we get to see what we had never seen before, that leaders of political parties come together, at least for a photo moment. That by and of itself would be an achievement, because the country had not seen it before. But we want to get beyond that. Now, we do understand the argument of NOPE, and of course, we live in the same country, and we pick up the undertones. There is a suspicion that ahead of elections 2021, there is a way in which there's a sense in which the political parties are rallied with the NRM party in order to make it difficult for NOPE to succeed in the election. So when NOPE comes to this space, or is invited to this space, you would imagine that they would then be timid, or they would have reservations on what are the intentions. Look, why go to a space where we hear rumors, unproved though, that there was a conspiracy to keep NOPE, to make sure NOPE does not succeed like it did. And therefore, but the argument there is that, you see, as NOPE, you have come up as a young party and broken all the hurdles that existed, the barriers. You have also done so many things that were unprecedented. And therefore, if you want to grow as a party, you need to look at yourself as one that transcends over the rest of the opposition parties that you found in place. And therefore, the only way you can demonstrate that you are different is by accepting to join that space. Look, if you are a good dancer and you know you dance better than the fellow on the stage, the only way you are going to prove that you are actually a good dancer is not by abandoning the stage. It's by jumping onto the stage and demonstrating to the audience that, look, I can have better moves than this one. So I think the young party that is NOPE should have to reconsider, should make sure that they understand that this is actually an opportunity, not a threat. An opportunity for them to get in there and showcase their potential. An opportunity to get there and reassure the nation. An opportunity to get there and silence the naysayers in order for them to write their name in the league of political and democratic heavyweights. So I think accountability as an issue is one of the things they can start with by making sure they get there and they report to the citizenry, but also they account for their time there, that beyond photo moments, there are a few incremental changes that you can achieve. Look, at iPod, in the situation I've just explained, where you have one man who has captured all the institutions, you are not going to have to, to wrestle power very easily from him. But you see, so you cannot have big bang achievements, but at least there will be those incremental ones that you can report about that can presuppose that there is a likelihood that you will move forward. So precisely that's what I can talk about in line with your question. Back to you, Abel.
Thank you so much, Henry. Felix, you've just heard from the back when he came out and said by 2021 there won't be any opposition, and very many people decided to reflect back to and decided to say that maybe we are heading back to a movement system which we were in before, where only one political organization was allowed to conduct activities, organize and mobilize citizens to rally and also run through that very movement system. Do you think we have really transited from the movement system to a multi-party state when such statements still continue coming out? Felix,
no, I seem to have, I didn't pick your question very well. Can you repeat it, please? I'm having a network problem.
I'm saying we had some time back the head of state saying that by 2021 we shall never have an opposition trying to compete with the current regime, and very many pundits and other people in Uganda reflected back and said maybe we are heading back to a movement system where only one organization, political organization, was allowed to mobilize and organize citizens in the country. So in your own view, do you think Uganda has really transited from the movement system where other political parties were blocked and they were not allowed space to organize and mobilize citizens?
Interestingly, because I think the bigger question is, have we really ever had multi-party politics in Uganda? All we have what can be dressed as multi-party politics. I think Uganda, for long, we've lived in the shadows and the hangover of a one-party state. Even when we transited in 2015, the manner in which our multi-party politics is being practiced is, by and large, more of a monologue. What do I mean? Is that when you look at the infrastructure, the frameworks in place, the infrastructure and the environment that is supposed to nurture and grow and support political parties, because those are the main levers upon which multi-party does run, is that you see that on paper, yes, we can talk about multi-party politics, but in practice, I think it's a highly debatable issue. One, for example, when you look at the financing of political parties alone, because for multi-party politics to thrive, you need political parties that are healthy, strong, and functional. To have healthy political parties that are strong and functional, you need to resource them very well. But when you look at the way the current political parties are financed, especially even when you have a law, the amounts they receive and the principles that are followed when they are sharing monies between political parties, and the mind behind who is responsible for giving out that money to the political parties, you really see a country struggling to walk in the path of political partyism. But outlook, it gives you a multi-party dispensation, but in practice, it gives you a one-party state. You have one big party, which in actual sense was a state transiting into a party. So the question is, did it ever transit into a party, or we had a fusion of state structures taking on a form, being renamed, being rebaptized as an organ called a party, political party called NRM. So you even, when you look at the history of NRM as a party, becoming from NRMO to from the movement system to NRMO as an organization and as a party, you really see that they never really transited. What they did was to just get the architect, the infrastructure, and they dressed it up as the party. So that's why you can have an RDC who is a public official taking instructions from the party and being partisan and not sorry about it. So there's a problem there. But that said, when you come to the financing architecture, you again see the same problem of having the party already enjoying state resources, because again, it's very difficult to separate the party NRM from the state. The same party taking advantage of the laws to have the lion's share when it comes to financing political party activities. But also when it comes to the way state institutions function, especially when in terms of regulating or enforcing laws that are supposed to nurture and grow political partyism in Uganda, you really see state institutions functioning in favor of a certain party. So do we have multi-party politics? I think for me, it's when you look at what's happening, the practice, it's a highly debatable scenario in Uganda. But I think on paper, yes, you see some elements of multi-party politics. But it is in the interest of the state of Uganda to really strengthen the organs that make multi-party politics thrive and function. It is in the interest of the president to have strong opposition political parties, because they among the many things they do is that they're supposed to check government, provide alternatives to government. They are supposed to be the breeding grounds for future leaders. But even when, as I conclude on this matter, even when we see very weak opposition by design of the way government has structured the functioning of multi-party politics, I think also government has taken advantage of already a disorganized group called opposition, self-seeking individuals, and many of these political party organizations or parties have their internal weaknesses that have made it very easy for NRM to weaken them and probably to see the threat Museveni made come to light of day. I think if they were strong, very organized, and the NRM party would have found a very they would have found it very difficult to actualize the promise the president made of having no opposition parties come 2021. I think they took advantage of the fact that as the opposition as is already is disorganized in many forms. Some of them lack orientation, political orientation. Many of them are self-seeking. So when you take advantage of those weaknesses, it is very easy to conclude that indeed by 2021, the face of the opposition would have changed. And this is where we are at the moment, unfortunately.
Thanks so much, Felix. Eddie, Felix brings in a very interesting perspective of self-seeking politicians. And we now know that in Uganda, we have very many of them who like playing politics of victimization, whereby they want to be seen as victims of whereby they have suffered, and they try to use that as one of the strategies to win sympathy and support from the masses. and they are not interested in anything that is meaningful, like dialoguing and something that will make them be seen as people who are now in the same bed, maybe with the government, in the current government, in power. So do you think really these opposition political parties which are in place, or I oftentimes like calling them the alternative government, do you think they can be able to offer an alternative view to the government in power without being biased and maybe without being seen as people who are in the same bed with the government in power?
Thank you, Abel. In my earlier reports and papers I've written, I have indicated to you that politics is now a major cash crop in Uganda. And if you want to get money, the best thing you have to go into is politics. But also, the Ugandan class of voters have fallen prey to the tricks of politicians. That politicians are going to construe themselves as being victimized by the state to win the sympathy of voters, and they're going to do all weird things that are based on personal feelings and ideology that they should have as politicians and as leaders that would focus on true democracy. And sometimes, to play the devil's advocate, when the status quo, when the current government sees these kind of leaders, they don't take them serious. I will give, for purposes of knowledge and discussion, examples of the people we see, like the leadership of the Kampala City Authority, the political leadership, where everything that government tries to bring in as something that is going to be pro people is seen in terms of position, in terms of winking politicians and voters, and they seem to oppose everything. For me, if they're going to behave like this, government will have no option other than shutting them down. They need to sit down and draw their political plan. They need to sit down and show their political maturity, but by giving alternative views, government should follow to provide alternative governance, but not to come out and make noise on each and everything, whether it makes political sense or not. And at the end of the day, they're political comics. They come to have their self-seeking views and benefits they can have, and then leave the show. And there are very many examples we can have to show that. At the end of the day, we are lacking politics that brings people together to make decisions that affect a voter, in the sense of a voter who is well off, as in the sense of a voter who is benefiting government services, in the sense of a voter who is there to grow. To a voter is always going to be disgruntled. I'm tempted to think that government, the status quo, is behaving like that because even those persons in the opposition are not serious about what they're doing. In many cases, the president has come up to say, yes, I want to leave, but who do I hand over to? He has always taken opposition members as comics, and in such a circumstance, you don't expect anything would happen. And therefore, what do I say? Let them man up. Let the politicians man up and decide on a political path. Let them not use populism and politics of victimization as a method of how they want to work. Let them present their ideas, and government will listen. And I want to re-echo my statement. Probably this is the last chance I had, that politics and economics go hand in hand, and we are at the time when politics and economics must be joined together, and people work for that. The leaders work for the people to be out of poverty. than making noise on the streets, if I have, for lack of a better word. Thank you, Abel.
Thanks so much. And I want to bring in Henry on this aspect of where Felix was hinting about the financial architecture of how political parties in Uganda are being financed. We do know that political parties are the wheels upon which democracy sails. But currently in Uganda, we are seeing how political parties are not being well financed, and they need the money to be able to grow and also organize and compete effectively. You have done a lot of work around financing of political parties and also political party financing at large. I want to understand from you, do you think it's a deliberate move by the current regime to just deliberately not give political parties money, especially those represented in parliament, on time, and also just deliberately not comply to the law when it comes to aspect of financing political parties in respect of elections?
Thank you, Abel. That's a very interesting subject, and it will remain interesting for the next many years to come. Financing political parties under democracy, there are avenues that are internationally acceptable. The first one is raising money through membership fees. Unfortunately, the parties in Uganda, to belong to those parties, it is instead the parties to pay you, instead of you paying them. So the avenue of membership fees doesn't exist. The second one is through fundraisings. Political parties organize, public events and solicit for money, seek for money from donors. Instead, when it comes to fundraising, it is the political parties and politicians that go to the fundraising of the activities of the communities and donate. Number three, political parties can also, own business. We know of political parties such as the UPC that has the Obote Foundation and Uganda House that are generating this income. You can have these facilities. We have been waiting for almost forever for the 27-story building of the NRM to see the light of day. That hasn't happened. Now, so in the absence of that, that's when the government of Uganda came up with the plan B that many other jurisdictions in Europe have adopted. The one of public financing, where government allocates a certain amount of money from the public coffers to finance these political parties. This money is guided by the force of the law. Of course, we have the law in place. The dynamic is in the manner of sharing. Now, I think this money that we have that is appropriated under the Political Parties and Organizations Act, Section 14, is one that does, over the past, I think, 8 years, since 2015, when it was first appropriated, has only gone in as far as advantaging one side, one political party, the party in power, at the expense of the opposition political parties. Give an example. Section 14B of the Political Parties and Organizations Act commands government to finance political parties in respect of elections. This section has been ignored for almost indefinitely. And the reason is simple, because if you are going to finance political parties around elections on equal basis, then you are going to give oxygen to those political parties that would give you headache. If that had happened, for example, in 2016, I think we would do, the challenger, the one who petitioned the election, wouldn't have suffered with the collecting evidence, because then quite a number of political parties would have been able to deploy polling agents at polling stations and collecting this information. So the point I'm trying to make is this, that political parties, as in and of themselves, also have a problem in Uganda, because they don't seem to be espousing the principles of openness and transparency and accountability in utilization of funds. We do not know who funds them. Some of them are funded by individual people. Some of them could be mafia. Some of them could have selfish interests. We don't know. We have actually, by keeping a blanket around how political parties are financed, we have allowed the dirty money to penetrate our politics. And this is bad for Uganda. And so I'm also equally concerned that Parliament does not see this as a responsibility, because if you look at the agenda of Parliament, you do not see where they have prioritized putting in place a rigorous legal and institutional framework to kind of insulate Uganda's politics from the influence of that money that comes from out that is dirty. As I wind up on this matter, you see, in the situation we are in, we are actually allowing money from the proceeds of money laundering, excuse me, the proceeds of trafficking in illegal trafficking in animal products, human products, to enter our politics. And the reason this money enters our politics is because the profiteers from these illicit businesses would want to maintain the status quo. The status quo in terms of the personalities in place, but also status quo in terms of the laws that can protect them. And therefore, until we have transcended the party divides and put forward national issues, I think we'll continue to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As I know, we are running out of time, and I want to give each of us 2 minutes to wind up with one last question, which is I want us all to give us your views on what are the prospects of dialogue in Uganda as a means of entrenching multi-party dispensation. I will start with Elizabeth.
Of antagonistic politics where, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Ugandans need to drop that nature of antagonistic politics where political parties shouldn't see eye to eye. If you're seeing, we have seen parties that have embraced dialogue, usually termed as, they've said that they have been married to the NRM or they have been bought off. So Ugandans need to appreciate that that dialogue is for political stability and cohesive government. We need to embrace that dialogue in general.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Gerald, what is your take on dialogue as a means of entrenching multipartyism in Uganda? Gerald, are you on?
Yes, Abel. My network was breaking, but I think you asked about our parting shot on the prospect of having a dialogue in our multi-party dispensation. And my take is Uganda, we've gotten a very clear framework. We have National Consultative Forum that is in place, which was introduced in 2010. Its subscription is political parties which are registered by Electoral Commission, and we've got an iPod of which the subscription is by mere representation from the parliament. And these are the only ways when how the opposition parties, they can come together on a drawing table with the party in the power and be able to iron out the issues that affect them, because there are a lot of challenges to do with the organizing. Of course, the opposition political parties, they need to reach the ground. They need to reach to open out. Build party structures countrywide. And there has been, of course, like such kind of shrinking space. The Public Order Management Act, which was there, and it was one of the policies that has been affecting organizing voters, recruiting the political parties recruiting their members. So dialogues, they are the only alternative, since in Uganda and particularly in Africa, there is this very tendency where, like, for instance, if you see an opposition, coming together with someone who is in, with a ruling party, and there is this tendency and the belief that these leaders are co-opted So dialogue, I think they are the only alternative where which opposition and the other, political parties will be able to harmonize and see the peaceful coexistence together, because it's one government. When you're in the parliament, you are you're offering alternative policies. So opposition is part of the government. So when you are in opposition, you're working for the people of the Republic of Uganda. So I believe that IPOD and through, of course, the National Consultative Forum, these are the best and the remediable and the formidable spaces where all the political players can come and see how they can share their views and the recommendations that we should come up with. Actually, the accountability mechanism, like for instance, if these resolutions, which are always passed by political parties, and we should see the proper implementation of these very recommendations which are put in place, which are raised by different political players. I thank you so much, Abel.
Thanks so much, Gerald. Eddie, do you also subscribe to that notion that dialogue is the best way for Uganda to adopt as one of the ways of entrenching our multi-party dispensation?
Yes, Abel.
I was asking you, do you also subscribe to that notion of dialogue as one of the best ways of entrenching multi-party dispensation in Uganda?
I have already asserted my position over the same, and I mentioned that we, for lack of a better word, street politics is not the way for Uganda. We must go on the round table and decide on alternative policies that we can use to have the people. If NUP cannot do that, then we do not have they don't have a position in Uganda's growing democracy, if at all democracy is there at all. The preoccupation of removing the person in the name of the president has failed, and we are going to remain with him for until I don't know when. But what we should be preoccupied with is how can we work within the current political situation to ensure that we get to politics that works for the people. COVID is here. Everybody's affected. They're calling you to have money, to work for your people, to have jobs, to have employment. But you're not willing to do that. IPOD is the platform where they would have discussed such kind of issues, in addition to the issues that affect administration and growth of the parties. So for me, as I conclude this, we need to have dialogue. Parties must work together. You recall when FDC refused to attend IPOD, and the reason they were giving is that we don't want to shake the hands of the president. That is not acceptable to any person who is in political development. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much. There was a question that was raised by Tuhewa Paya, so I will want Henry and Felix to respond to this. So I will start with Felix. Pius was asking that, is it feasible for political parties to generate sustaining activities in Uganda? So Felix, as you also chip into, give your parting shot, you can also respond to that very question. Is it feasible for political parties to generate self-sustaining activities in Uganda?
Yes, I think it is very much feasible for political parties to generate self-sustaining activities in Uganda. You see, just imagine, we've seen self-help groups. There are non-political groups, yes, but there are self-help groups that are engaged in income-generating activities. It's the same model. It's just that now you just suppose it within a political environment. And I can understand someone may argue that the environment is a bit more hostile to political parties in how far and how much they can engage in income-generating activities. But this does not mean that it is entirely not possible for political parties to find
I don't know why I'm muted. One of the ways through which a political party has to be self-sustaining is to have other forms of generating income or resources that should be able to run that political party. So we've not seen political parties think beyond getting money from membership, even where that's even under that very few political parties can be able to generate enough resources. We've not seen many political parties think about engaging in income generating activities beyond the money that comes from the donations that come from government, and also donations that come from those other like-minded political parties that sympathize with their cause. For example, UPC has a foundation through which it can generate resources. There's no, there is no law stopping political parties from having foundations through which they can get resources. There is no law barring political parties from engaging in real estate, for example, to generate resources. I think it's a mindset issue of most political parties preferring to rely more on other external resources than internal financing beyond just membership fees and party financing, public party financing. But the law, unless I've misread the law, I've not seen where the law really does restrict parties from engaging in income generating activities. They only put caps on money coming from sources, from out, and also caps from donations, caps on donations, but also they also put restrictions on sources of money coming from what are deemed to be hostile regimes or states. So other than that, I think it's the political parties are just, I want to say maybe they are lazy to move out and explore other ways of generating income to run party activities. It is very much possible.
Thank you so much, Felix. Henry, as you now wrap up on and also give your parting shot, there was still another question that Pius, to hear you ask, why have the previous dialogue attempts failed? Should dialogue focus on opposition, or the current regime has the key role to play? As you give us your parting shot, you can also respond to that question.
Thank you very much, Abel, and of course, thank you, Pius, for keeping with us. And I'm sure next week you'll join us here as a panelist, Pius. Now, in Uganda, in the history of Uganda, we have tried all forms of chaos, and it has failed. The only option we have not tried is dialogue in terms of transfer of power. So I think that gives us a chance to now favor dialogue as a transfer of power. Now, the questions Pius put forth: why have previous dialogue attempts failed? Of course, they failed because the president, whom my colleague Felix alluded to earlier, to seem to be still nursing hangover of of the movement system, doesn't think that the dialogue should be a way to go. But when you hear the cries from the nation, everybody has been talking national dialogue, national dialogue, national dialogue. So I think until the president understands that, you see, dialogue can lead to both ways. It can lead to one way of strengthening your stay in power. It can also lead to your exit. I think that is his fear. What if this dialogue ends up in me exiting? Where am I going? So I think that fear is the problem now. Should the dialogue focus on the regime? I think there are far bigger things than just the regime, because the regime is in its evening. The truth must be told. My good colleague Eddie talked about government staying, but the truth is the regime is in its evening. Okay, and therefore to focus on the regime is to focus on something so minor. So I think we need to focus on the bigger things, because today you can remove the regime, and the infrastructure that has rendered this country incompetent remains in place. What about the mindsets? People have been wronged. People in Uganda have issues they have stayed with since the days of Dr. Milton Obote. The people in the north have been crying and clamoring for peace and reconciliatory commission. So I think there are much bigger things. The economy has been shattered and tattered and Chinaized. So there are things we need to look at. The youth are agitated, they are sleep restless. We need to address those issues. So I think the country has been divided along lines of tribe, what, broken down, and people have lost their nationality, ethnic backgrounds. And therefore, these are bigger things, but I think dialogue is the way to go. I thank you.
Thank you so much. You have been a very wonderful panel with your different perspectives and insight. I like that all of you have a different calling and passion on the area of electoral democracy, and you've given us your various perspectives. I want to thank the audience outside there who have been following us from the start up to now. It has been me, Abel Eseri, moderator. This is the perspective. The other perspective, it will be running every Wednesday from 11 up to 12 noon. So just keep tuned. We shall be coming back next week with another round of the other perspective. We shall have again more of the same panelists where they will be giving us their perspective on various topics that are happening in Uganda and also Africa. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best, fruitful week and weekend, and let's meet next week on Wednesday, same time.